Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining us for the segment, we have Aaron Wilson, co-founder and principal of EonXI, which invests and empowers founders in the Web 3.0 ecosystem. Aaron, it's great to have you with us. Welcome to Trade Talks.
Oh, thank you very much. Appreciate it, Jill. Thanks for having me.
You got it. And what were the motivations for founding EonXI, and what does EonXI mean, so we can understand the genesis behind that?
For sure. So that's a great question. The primary reason behind EonXI being brought to fruition was to operate as a bridge, or connect the connective tissue, if you will, between entertainers, celebrities, athletes, and also the private equity and tech landscape. So we'd found that a lot of celebrities, entertainers, athletes, etc., they weren't being afforded exposure, access, or opportunities to get a peek at really competitive deal flow in the private equity and technology landscape. So with that, we figured that we could be that bridge. And also, when we took a more micro look at what was happening with these individuals and the space, we found that a lot of them came from underserved communities and inner city communities where there was a lack of exposure to emerging tech and also the VC space and private equity. So then we honed in a little bit more on our focus, and it was more so to connect and operate as that bridge between individuals who are coming from these these inner cities, communities, and people who are typically disenfranchised, and affording them opportunities to gain exposure to private equity, tech, the deal flow happening there, and emerging tech overall.
And EonXI has been early when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion as a venture capital fund and incubation lab. How does one ensure equitable access to the industry of technology, more particularly access to Web 3.0 products and solutions in 2022?
Absolutely. And, I'll take a moment to address the tail end of the question you had asked before as it pertains to EonXI and what it means. So Eon represents a billion ideas. X is actually the problem that we're solving, and I represents inclusivity and innovation by way of interoperability, which is the underlying philosophy of Web3. And that's so important to addressing the question that you just asked regarding equitable access in the Web3 space and how to achieve that. And it all comes down to exposure and representation. When it comes to exposure in particular, we have to make a concerted effort and a concerted approach toward increasing exposure so that individuals who are in the inner city or in certain areas where they're not necessarily getting access to emerging tech can become early adopters. So they're not necessarily sitting on the sidelines watching the next, evolution of the internet, Web3, go by and go to its peak and start to descend, but rather being able to become active participants. And we're making a concerted effort in doing so by way of introducing emerging tech to the inner city by gaming and esports. We actually have created an esports league. It's a fully academically integrated esports league that was created with State Space. They're our strategic partner in this endeavor, being led by Wayne Mackey. And what we're doing is we're introducing esports environments, and that's also operating as a segue to introduce STEM and STEAM-oriented coursework to students in these schools at an early age, so they're not left on the sidelines watching their counterparts in middle class and upper middle class neighborhoods get exposure to gaming and new opportunities through gaming. In addition to that, we also in recent times have been heads down working on a metaverse concept that we'll be bringing to the market at the end of the month this month, and it's set to really set the tone and revolutionize the way people are looking at the open world, and also play to earn gaming, and a ton of opportunities that come about because of that. And what we're really looking for at this point is to identify enterprises, strategic partners, prospective investors who are adamant about really making an impact and would like to be a part of this journey and join us in doing so.
And Aaron, tell us about your investment network, the partners that have come to the foray to support EonXI's growth.
Absolutely. So we've been fortunate to have some really great partners. As it pertains to our investor network, it spans across individuals who are high net worth sports executives to athletes, some of those athletes, to name a few. Sean Livingston from the Golden State Warriors, two-time NBA champ. Also, individuals like David Amerson, who's currently a venture partner at EonXI Ventures and also head of influencer partnerships. Individuals like Malik Monk of the Los Angeles Lakers, And while those are, a great group of individuals who we've been working with to identify some amazing opportunities in the space, we are looking for more wonderful individuals to add to the network who are interested in really affecting change, doing it in a big way.
Where would you envision the brand expanding in the future?
That's a wonderful question. Now, obviously, I'm not a psychic, so I can't tell you exactly what's going to happen, but I'd say it's a bifurcated approach. By way of our investment vehicle, EonXI Ventures, our goal is to build the next generation of LP investors. Now, of course, it's super important to focus on, well, not just LPs, but GPs as well. However, we find, and we have found, that one of the biggest disparities is that there's a lack of representation at the LP level. So our goal is to build the new wave, new generation of managers who are managing fund of fund vehicles so that they can consequently invest in other GPs as well. And that could trickle down, obviously, to the founders and consequently to the people. We coined this phrase as trickle down capital. Now, on the incubation lab side of things for EonXI Labs, one of our biggest goals is to build an extremely robust network of developers. And that robust network of developers would be developers from all walks of life. So we really want to bring the idea of diversity in its essence to fruition. And by diversity, we mean having developers who are white, Black, Latinx, Asian, you name it. Too often we think of diversity as just a term that should be relevant to people of color, but diversity in its essence means everyone from all walks of life. And one of the biggest problems that we'd like to address that our society faces is this divisive dynamic that has been plaguing us for years and will continue to do so until we start working and building together. And our form of working and building together is the co-development and co-creation of disruptive concepts within our incubation lab. It's interesting when I'm speaking with my partner, Sherrod Harrington, pretty often about these ideas, it all comes back to number one, togetherness, number two, the amazing things that we can do through technology, and number three, how we're going to solve big problems with important and tenacious individuals.
Right. It is so refreshing to hear you say that, because I would imagine one of the biggest challenges hindering DEI in the Web 3.0, to your point, is this divisive mindset. Are there any other challenges that you're looking to tackle?
Absolutely. One of the biggest things that we're looking to do is start introducing, I guess, the idea of how people can get more involved at, I guess, from a leadership perspective within the Fortune 500, right? These kinds of individuals, they have a lot of influence, they have a lot of power. And while we're transitioning from Web 2.0 to Web 3.0, a lot of different leaders within the space need to, I guess, start getting more acclimated with what Web 3 offers and the benefits from an infrastructure perspective. So we'd like to see a lot of individuals start becoming better educated in the space, because then we can learn how to affect change a lot faster. And Web3's infrastructure, just based on the distributed ledger, it provides a lot of unbiased approaches toward how to run different businesses and how to do that. I mean, when you think about decentralized autonomous organizations and how DAOs are becoming the new wave as it pertains to organizational governance, these are all things that we really like people to become better educated on so that we can move a lot faster in order to make an impact in the right way.
Aaron, let me ask you one more question, because I think this is where education is key here. If I understand it correctly, Web3 is advertised as decentralized and user-owned, which is different than what we see with Web2, which is Google, Apple, Facebook, Meta, as they're called now. Is there a concern at all that it becomes too influencer-based? You rattled off a number of names that are, in the sports world, highly influential. Are you concerned at all that it's going to become yet another VC, whoever has the money to invest wins, and it becomes Web 2 all over again for those reasons? How do you ensure that it does in fact remain decentralized and the users ultimately are the ones that benefit and retain the control from their own innovation and creations?
So that's super interesting that you asked that. And these are the kinds of conversations that we're having on a daily basis, because what it comes down to is exactly how the community is being built. Right? The underlying thought process is, if it's built by a community, owned by a community, run by a community, then nepotism doesn't exist, then bias doesn't exist, or if it does exist, then these are some of the checks and balances or mechanisms that have been put in place to reduce it as much as possible. Obviously, the world will not change overnight. And of course, there are individuals who are involved who have different, I guess, different value that they'll gain out of being able to control certain narratives. But the Web3 space, from what we've seen, is making a concerted effort. The individuals who are influential in the space are making a concerted effort to ensure that it remains as decentralized as possible, so that everyone does have a voice and that communities, again, benefit. So it really just comes down to building solid communities and ensuring that when we're making that transition from a centralized dynamic to a decentralized dynamic, that we're more so working on this slow transition, and we're identifying specific problems that were the unforeseen as they come about.
Good. All right. That's good to know that it's in the back of everyone's mind. Aaron, we appreciate
Absolutely.
the insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.
Thanks for having me.